views expressed on this program by its guests do not necessarily reflect the views or beliefs of the host or radio network. And this program's sole intent is to help educate, foster critical debate, and help raise and discuss political and social issues which already exist in the public domain. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR. This is episode 347 of the Sunday Wire. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We've got a powerful broadcast lined up for you this week. We are touch and go. We're trying to get a reading on our roving correspondent for culture and sport, Basil Valentine, who's currently out in the field surveying some of the political activities on the street in England. So we'll try to see if we can catch him by phone possibly, but we're not sure. We're still working on that. We might have an update on that in the break. And in the meantime, I want to direct everybody to 21stCenturyWire.com. And if you go to the website, you'll see a link to the Election Edge live blog. And if you want to get any updates as to, what's basically cooking in the last minutes before the November 3rd U.S. presidential election, go to our live blog. You'll see a lot of election tips, a lot of interesting things there, factoids, latest poll readings, and scandals. It's all up there. And myself, Basil Valentine, and a few other our 21 Wire contributors are posting on the live blog. So do keep an eye on that during the week as well, Monday and Tuesday. And as we talked about during our Election Edge specials, we've done 5 episodes. And I think we'll have another couple of reports. I have a mini report coming out maybe tonight or tomorrow, and then another episode coming out on election morning. So we're sort of looking at seeing what's happening at the last minute, seeing which way voters are leaning, seeing if there's any breaks in any direction. Certainly the scandal meter is constantly running. There's just another Hunter Biden laptop turned up with some quite disturbing data on it, the personal contact details of every high-ranking Democrat from Hillary Clinton right down to Pelosi and the rest of them. That was also on there. That turned up in a DEA raid of a former Fox News celebrity psychologist or therapist or something like that. And that was a strange one. So they did a drugs raid on this celebrity shrink and found another Hunter Biden laptop there. So knowing what we know about Joe Biden's son Hunter, and he's into crack, and he got sacked from the U.S. military for testing positive for cocaine in 2013. So maybe he's involved in that, and then maybe this was his supplier or something. I don't know. Drug dealer to the rich and famous. So that's a story that just surfaced in the last 24 hours. NBC actually reported that. So that was a bit weird, something strange going on there. They've actually been holding on to that laptop for a few months, in fact, or maybe more. So this is something that happened previously. It's only being reported now. So that's one of those strange stories there. But yeah, if you do survey these episodes, you'll find a lot of the analysis dealing with the battleground states. We've identified, a whole slew of battleground states, which way we think they're going to turn. And we also gave our predictions for the Electoral College, how we think if the Electoral College was happening on Saturday, what do we think it would be like in terms of results? Well, we are looking at some late-breaking states that are breaking towards the Republicans. One of those is Arizona. As we said, Arizona is a really important swing state. That's absolutely breaking in the direction of red. So we updated our map, our electoral map, and electoral votes, Donald Trump, we project 325 and Joe Biden 213. Now our projections are very different than what you're seeing in mainstream polls. And what's interesting, if you look at a lot of the mainstream polls, they've got Biden really winning by the biggest landslide since 1964, the biggest Democratic landslide since 64. So, I mean, it's almost impossible if you look at the numbers, if you look at the data on the ground in all of these key swing states, there's no way that Biden could be getting a result like that. And yet this is what's being sort of broadcast across all major outlets and all the major pollsters, the Nate Silver, Nate Cohn, and all of these guys, more or less saying the same thing, although they're sort of, a couple of them started hedging a little bit. They did announce that Iowa is definitely breaking for Trump. And so we called that 2 weeks ago on the first Election Edge episode that we had, or the second, I think. Yeah, I think it was the second one. So we called that pretty early on, and we knew that was coming. So it's interesting. Some of these mainstream pollers are kind of catching up a little bit, or they're revealing a little bit more of what the true picture is. And the true picture is it's a very, very dead even race in terms of nationally. In terms of the popular vote, probably Biden has an edge. The Democrats generally have an edge because of California and New York and the Eastern Seaboard, Boston, high density population centers. So, that's not a surprise. But if you want to look at who's going to win the U.S. presidential election on November 3rd, you have to look at the Electoral College. You have to look at state by state. You've got to look at swing states, all 15 of them, and sort of the extreme 7 or 8 swing states. If you do that, you'll see a very different picture. So this is what we see. We identified a lot of intangibles. We'll see if we're correct or not. That's just the scenario that we've come up with based on the data we've been looking at, the independent analysis we've been looking at. I'm pretty much ignoring the popular vote. I'm pretty much ignoring national mainstream polls, national opinion polls, because, well, as the people who we follow have said time and time again, they've been wrong. They've been wrong in a lot of the previous elections. And it's strange because even though their record is terrible, they still go back and they still sort of boost all these polls as the sort of, the top source of, predictability of what's going to happen every election. They're wrong every time. It's the strangest thing. I mean, CNN is funny. They've got something called the poll of polls. It's this kind of amalgamation of all these mainstream Monmouth and Quinnipiac and, all these mainstream polls, and call it the poll of polls. It's just like ridiculous. There's the temple of information, the cable news network, CNN, at their holy temple in Atlanta. They've got the poll of polls. It's like the God oracle of polls, and it's hardly ever been right. So people have to be like wondering, why do people follow these people all the time? It's strange. And we were looking at this and we thought, is it because they're just arrogant? Is it because they're stupid? Is it because they're projecting a false reality because they think in their mind, which is a kind of general left-wing trait, is that if you imagine it, that it becomes true. That if they just project a Clinton landslide or project a Biden landslide, that somehow it will materialize and become a real thing. And that kind of magical thinking, if you learned anything from 2016, it's that kind of magical thinking doesn't exist. It doesn't work. You need, if you want results, they need to be sort of tangible, and they need to materialize on the ground. So right now in this election, mind you, it's been a very abbreviated campaign because of lockdowns, because of COVID, the pandemic. There weren't really conventions in the summer for either party, especially the Democrats. Have been doing everything on Zoom. So it's really an abbreviated campaign and election cycle, and this is unusual. We've never seen this before in history. So this is like new territory. It didn't need to be this way, is what we're saying. It should have just gone as normal. But the country went into extreme paranoia mode, and it seemed to me like the mainstream media, this new medical industrial complex, and the new kind of scientific dictatorship that's kind of emerged out of this in America, led by Lord Fauci, and in the UK, led by Chris Whitty and Pat Vallance and the science advisors at SAGE. This is kind of this new branch of government, this kind of new Sanhedrin, if you will. Is strange. It's strange. So they're dictating how we go about our lives, how we run our democracy, how we run our political campaigns, who's allowed to gather and in which numbers. So because of this, it's been a very short, strange campaign. But all of a sudden, in the last 2 weeks, it's become real. I mean, this is what it should look like. It's what it should have looked like for the last couple of months. So, but the contrast is unbelievable. And as if you watch the Election Edge episode 5, we contrasted the most amazing image of all the images I've seen in politics in my whole life. This is one of the most stark images, and what it was a side-by-side comparison of a Biden rally and a Trump rally. The Trump rally was in the video, was playing simultaneously with the Biden one. The Biden one, well, I'll tell you what the Trump one was like. So it was Trump coming down in a presidential helicopter, descending on a crowd of, I don't know how many, 20,000 or something, 10, 20,000 or so. I don't know which state it was in. Maybe it's Pennsylvania. And they're blaring over this huge concert sound system, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And then everyone's just going wild. And it's like, it's beyond a rock concert. You know, it's just, they're going crazy. Everyone's in MAGA hats. And then you see the Biden event below. And it's Joe Biden walking into a garden party with like 40 people, and they're all socially distanced with big white circles on the grass for each table. So the groups of 3, and nobody could step outside the circle. And Joe comes down; he's wearing a mask. So you have this mad, crazy American rock concert type atmosphere that's just, gushing with patriotic vigor and excitement. And then you got Joe in a socially distanced, invite-only garden party. And that pretty much says it all. I mean, the contrast is unbelievable. So, we talk about the enthusiasm gap. No one's ever seen anything like this. And I always asked myself from the beginning of this, would the Democrats be so dumb and so inept as to run a worse campaign than Hillary ran in 2016? And a lot of people regarded her campaign at the time as the worst presidential campaign ever. In other words, they hid her away. They did small invite-only events, and they just assumed that she was going to win, and she was kind of paraded around with this air of entitlement, that she was A, entitled to the nomination, and B, entitled to the presidency. And it was just a fait accompli. It's just wait for November to come along, and the arm's going to be pulled, and she's going to just assume the presidency, like this kind of fairy tale story. And of course, that's not what happened. And as bad of a campaign as Hillary ran in 2016, Joe has managed to top it. And not top it and do better, top it and do worse. He's managed to run, I personally think, twice as bad of a campaign. I'm looking at Hillary Clinton now. Compared to Joe Biden, I'm looking at Hillary, and I'm thinking she's not a bad candidate. I mean, she's bit younger. She's got massive appeal to women. And, she can talk policy. She's compos mentis. As poorly as she was in terms of a presidential candidate in 2016, she's almost like 4 times better than Joe Biden. 4-fold better. I would, I'd lay a bet on her before I'd ever lay a bet on Joe Biden. And that's a bit strange if you consider looking at the poll numbers right now. They've got Biden in 9-10 point lead. I saw New Hampshire 19-point lead. I mean, ridiculous numbers, and it's just crazy. So how is that possible? Where's the appeal for Joe Biden? And this is where it gets interesting. This is why this election is one of the most important elections in U.S. history. Few people will argue that the country's at a crossroads right now. And with this crazy, mad lockdown, just skullduggery, and you combine that with the post-George Floyd, massive riots and, cities being torched and agitprop mobs, race baiting. And I mean, this summer was very disturbing. From if you look at America as a country and just the vitriol, and no one's ever seen anything like this in a long time. I mean, it's been bad before, but it's a different sort of flavor of nasty now. The partisanship, the kind of extreme postmodernist, Marxist, extreme radical left. Okay, I'm not talking about the academic, reasonable, intelligent left wing, intelligent liberals. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about crazy street mobs, burning stuff, beating people, torching government buildings, things like this. Okay, this is crazy. This is bad. This is kind of a new level of anarchy that we haven't seen for a while, taking over 6 city blocks, as was the case in Seattle. And you look at all that and you think that, yeah, absolutely the country's at a crossroads. It's really polarized. It's super polarized. COVID, lockdown, the quote pandemic has increased the polarization. In fact, they're injecting this issue into politics now. They've politicized COVID. It's completely politicized now. I'll give you an example. There's a number of fake news reports that have been rushed out this weekend. And here's one. This is a total political setup here. Stanford study says Trump rallies linked to 30,000 COVID cases, 700 deaths. Trump campaign says it took steps to protect attendees, whatever. So they're blaming 30,000 quote cases, whatever that means, PCR positive cases. Those aren't cases, by the way, and probably not all of those are infections either. 700 deaths. They're linking, quote, linking to Trump rallies. So what they're saying is that it's been irresponsible, the president. This is Joe Biden's line as well. He said, Trump's holding these super spreader events around the country. It's really irresponsible. So this is a study by Stanford, hasn't been peer reviewed, and it looks all impressive in the headlines. But it's not from Stanford. It's from a group of people here conducted by economists from the university's Institute for Economic Policy Research. It's kind of like a department or a think tank within Stanford University. So it's not the university, but they call it a Stanford study. So yeah, it gives it a little bit of credibility. And they're saying that rallies in Phoenix, Tulsa, and Pittsburgh are responsible for 30,000 cases and 700 deaths. But you drill in further and you find out, what do we find out? This whole story, which has gone to every major media outlet in the US, this is based on computer models. So this is modeling that they've done, where they're guessing because they're looking at a correlation between a spike in cases in counties where Trump had rallies around, such and such a week period. And the team has concluded that the rallies increased the number of confirmed cases by more than 250 per 100,000 residents in those counties. So not much different than the kind of average nationally, but they've latched onto a correlation here. This is not a scientific study, or at least its conclusion's not. And I'm willing to bet you, if we actually read the report, it's not making as bold of claims categorically than you see in the headlines of the mainstream media outlets that are reporting on this. So chalk it up to election propaganda at the last minute. I mean, that's pretty desperate. But this has become the campaign rally, which has been blame Trump for the 220,000 deaths, and Biden says there's going to be 200,000 more by Christmas if we don't wear masks. So this is interesting. The Democrats' whole platform is fear. It's fear and misery. Lock down, wear a mask, socially distance, immunity passports, etc. So their whole campaign is fear. If you watch CNN, MSNBC, you look at these mainstream corporate media outlets, they've been pushing this fear agenda from the beginning, pretty much all year. So one campaign is selling fear. The other campaign is saying, no, let's open up. Let's be adults and learn to live with this like we learn to live with everything else. And take precautions if you feel it's appropriate, but we got to get on with our lives. Businesses need to run, the country needs to run, kids need to be in school. Okay, that's what the Republican candidate, the incumbent Donald Trump, is running on that platform. So clearly, if you contrast these, you have one side that's selling hope, that's selling real normality, and you have the other side that's selling fear, the Democrats. Joe Biden is clearly selling fear and a, quote, new normal, which is really a new abnormal. I mean, it can't be any more clear, this contrast right now, because it's coming right out of their mouths at all of their events. I mean, Joe's even got his events inside a little white circle, people stuck inside circles, to adhere to social distancing. It's like a dystopic game of Twister. See, you're not allowed outside your circle. This is what Joe Biden's selling. Now you have to ask yourself, is that what the American people want? Deep down inside, in America, do the people want to live inside circles? Do they want to be locked in their homes? Do they want their kids not to be at school? Do they want to live half their life on Zoom? Do they want to see more businesses go bankrupt? Do they want to see more unemployment? Do they want to see the debt, which is already spiraled out of control? Do they want to see the debt going crazy off the charts? The national debt, the personal debt, all of it. And deep down, there are people who might think that that's their only option because they've been brainwashed for the last 7 to 8 months by all the major networks. And it's so disingenuous that they're blaming the president, because they're not blaming any other world leaders in any other countries for the corona, quote, death toll. Most of a large portion, I would wager, of the, quote, death toll is bogus. These are deaths attributed to COVID. They've been doing it willy-nilly, racking up the numbers. And I believe, looking at this campaign now, the way the Democrats are running it, with the media backing this narrative, that it's Trump's fault, that he's responsible for 220,000 deaths on his watch, okay? You almost wonder, is this what they were racking up the deaths for? Is it for this? I think it's for other things too. It's for, some kind of not a mandatory vaccine rollout, but, well, if you don't get the vaccine, then you're not going to be able to travel, that sort of thing, or just pushing it to see how far they can push the vaccine. And there's a lot of people that are, quite frankly, profiting off this crisis. There's no question about that. The rich have gotten richer, the poor have gotten poorer. And it's been a massive consolidation of wealth. That's the first thing that we said back in March. We said this is going to be a massive consolidation of wealth. Why would I say that? How would I know? Well, it doesn't take a genius. Anytime you restrict the economy and then the government says, you're closed, you're open, they're picking winners and losers. And when you have the state picking winners and losers, and those who are strong enough in the market to weather the storm, this is like economics Darwinism 101. Those who've got the money, who've got the infrastructure, who've got the power, those who don't are out of business. Those who have it are in business. Those who have that money and are still in business can buy up all the competition. They can pick the carcasses up off the side of the road for pennies on the dollar. That doesn't take a genius to figure out. That wasn't hard to see. We said that. I pinned that on my Twitter account for the last 7 months. I said that at the end of March. And that is not fair at all. So this has created a warped, tilted playing field. This crisis, the pandemic. So who's benefited from that? Well, some people have. Silicon Valley has. Mark Zuckerberg has. Jack Dorsey and Google, Jeff Bezos, they've all benefited from it. Anybody in, quote, essential work has benefited from it. Anybody who's liquid, who's got cash, they've been buying everything up. So this election is historic. The American people, many of whom have already voted, very large percentage, record-breaking numbers for early voting and mail-in voting. So many have already voted. And this will be a test. This will be a test to see the Democrats, one is running on fear and one side is running on hope. One side, the entire mobilization of the Trump support base, what's mobilizing it? It's, well, they don't want to be locked down. This is one of them. So they're moving away from fear, and they absolutely love their president. I mean, the enthusiasm level is unbelievable. It's crazy. It's more than in 2016. It's much more than 2016. So there's a lot. They love their candidate. The Democrats, their whole campaign. I cannot work out for the life of me what policies, if any, I can remember from Joe Biden. The only thing I can remember that stuck in my head is we need mandatory masks and lockdowns maybe, or social distancing or something like this. I mean, it's the only policy that I thought was clearly articulated. I've heard nothing about foreign policy. Domestic policy, not much, if any. It's just like, yeah, masks, lockdown, COVID, and we hate Trump. Trump's bad. We need to get rid of Trump. Hate. So the Democrats' campaign is completely constructed. The framework is hate. It's a 100% negative campaign, fear and hate. They've loaded their campaign with fear and hate. And on the Republican side, it's hope. They love Trump. I mean, the passion is unbelievable. The numbers are just crazy. One of Trump's events, and he's doing 3 states a day, one of his events, and Biden's got a lot more money, by the way, in his war chest. I'm like, where's this money going? Where's the money? It's not, I mean, you can only buy so many TV ads. So one Trump event, on one day, he's doing 3 states a day right now or something like this. One of his events has more people at it than every single Biden event and Democratic event from this Biden campaign combined. So how is it possible that he could have such a landslide lead? Well, the press want you to think that it's because so many people in the country hate Trump. So, I mean, this is going to work against the Democrats in one way, in that if you're projecting a large lead for a weak candidate, and we said this very early on in our first Election Edge special, this is a fundamental. When you're projecting a false lead, that's not going to help mobilize support, because anybody who's on the fence, and let's be honest, folks, Biden's not everybody's cup of tea. Definitely not the Bernie bros. Definitely not that wing of the Democratic Party. They're not that enthused. So they'd be looking for an excuse to sit this one out. And, Biden's landslide poll lead, I mean, that sort of gives them an excuse not to even have to hold their nose and vote for Joe. So that false lead that they're projecting doesn't help mobilize voters. What it does do, however, is it sets up the narrative. And the narrative is that if and when, we're saying probably when Biden loses on November 3rd, then they're going to go to the press, and the press will be ready like magpies. Magpies on steroids. Magpies on meth. This is what the press is going to be like. Imagine that. They're going to be, the election was stolen. How did Donald Trump pull this off? We had such a big poll lead. All the polls said this, and this is exactly what happened in 2016. Hillary Clinton, same exact thing. Overprojection of some lead that didn't exist, and they say she had the election stolen from her, but the excuse was that the Russians did it in 2016. I mean, how stupid. How absolutely stupid. What a crazy conspiracy theory. And yet it didn't take much for that to get adopted because the media was pumping it out. And in the intelligence community, the corrupt, the Brennans, the Clappers, all this sort of treasonous members of the deep state, they were working behind the scenes to falsify FISA warrants, to leak fake stories to the press, all sorts of things, spying on the Trump campaign, the transition campaign as well, bring up bogus, trumped up fake charges against campaign associates to try to create the air of Russian collusion or Russian involvement. They faked the hacking reports. The FBI was CrowdStrike provided bogus reports to validate a DNC hack, which never happened. That's what the facts show. So nothing, of course, came out of the great Mueller probe, but they mounted that production. They brought in all the players, all the assets. They pushed that. They let that run for pretty much 4 years, and it was completely fabricated. So what I'm saying is that you have a situation where you have entities that when they club together, when they coordinate, they can create a wall of propaganda that's very, very difficult to scale. And the wall that they're going to create, it was Russia last time. The wall they're going to create now is that there was election fraud, and Trump and the Republicans are responsible. And the epicenter of this is going to be in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, some of these key swing states, North Carolina. And as we explained, if you watch our Election Edge 5 episodes, especially episodes 4 and 5, you'll see we explain very, very much in detail how this is going to play out, how the court cases are going to be applied to what situations in order to sow doubt. So we had a fantastic opportunity to interview Robert Barnes from Nevada. A lot of people know him on social media. He's incredible in terms of his election analysis, and he's a political gambler. And he told us how this is going to go down, if it goes down, how it's going to go down, and what it's going to look like, basically, in an interview we did just a couple of days ago. It's up on 21st Century Wire right now. There's a link on the show page. We're going to roll that segment now. So we're talking about where these court battles are going to be raging. They're going to do what's something called lawfare. And this is what happened during the Bush-Gore controversy in 2000. And that dragged on for months. and in a few other cases as well, which we'll mention in this segment. But we're going to go ahead and roll this and just listen closely. This is definitely one of the more reputable sources in terms of analytical skills. One of the best people you could be talking to here. But we're going to play this out because it's just so important, the information. And I'll tell you what happened with Facebook after we posted this. We'll talk about that after the segment. But go ahead and roll this. Robert Barnes and myself on Election Edge, episode 5. Listen to this.
So we talked a little bit earlier about some of the court challenges in terms of the late ballot submissions, and we still have a number of states that are in play. North Carolina, that's a potential flashpoint there. We're still looking at Pennsylvania, recent Supreme Court ruling on that as well. Wisconsin and Michigan, possibly, at least something's been decided at the state Supreme Court level. We don't know if things are going to go further or not. So these are the sort of key battleground states where there's these legal and court challenges that could potentially be disruptive after November 3rd. So for more on this, joining us now is a very special guest, live from Las Vegas, Nevada, Robert Barnes, attorney at law and self-confessed political gambler, who's joining us on the line right now. Robert, how are you doing?
Doing good.
So just straight off the bat, Robert, we've been following your feed over the last couple of months, as well, in the People's Pundit as well. You guys are doing amazing work. My first question is, why don't you trust mainstream national opinion polls? What have you got against those mainstream polls, Robert?
They've just been poor predictors of what election outcomes are likely to be, not a primary tool. And because of that, they're just unreliable and untrustworthy. And that is enhanced by the political bias of those who are gatekeepers for which polls get included and which ones get excluded. So people like the Nate Silvers of the world, Nate Cohn, Harry Ensign, these people have a political bias that shapes which polls they allow to be published and promoted and pushed, rather than those that they try to exclude and isolate. The most successful pollsters of 2016 are mostly excluded from even being on the list of published polls on groups like Nate Silver's 538. So there's even more reason this cycle to distrust the polls than prior years.
And just give us an idea of how long you've kind of had this methodology. How far back have you been kind of betting on elections or looking in this way?
So my system started when I was just a kid, and back in 1988. I've been betting on presidential elections ever since in some form or fashion. My biggest bet ever was 2016. Never lost a presidential election year bet. And during that entire time period, I never looked at polls. I considered polls as sort of irrelevant, inconsequential. That look at what people have actually done in terms of behavior, look at objective metrics, voter registration and primary participation rate and ratings and yard signs and rally size and also what people, in terms of what the economy looks like, what the context or situation is in terms of more war or less war. And those things are much better predictors of what's going to happen in a presidential election than what a pollster finds in testing out someone's ability to predict their own election forecast. So that my election forecasting mechanism has never lost. We'll see what happens in 2020.
So when you're betting on elections and things like that, obviously you need a degree of objectivity. I think that even more objectivity maybe than political analysts, for instance, that's kind of got a political edge that they're trying to push or an angle. So you've got this objectivity, Robert, but within the objectivity, do you see a massive disconnect between what's being projected in terms of like media, mainstream coverage, mainstream analysis, and then what's happening like on the street or what's happening out in the real world?
There's a complete disconnect at almost every single level. So presidential primary participation rates would say Trump easy. Voter registration data would say Trump easy. Almost all historical trends would say Trump. Professor North's model says Trump. The Oxford GDP model says Trump. The lack of a new war says Trump in the last 4 years. So and then almost all of the other objective metrics, yard signs, rally size, social media trends, as other professors have identified, all of these things say Trump, 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 Trump. The only thing saying otherwise are the polls, and they're predicting the biggest Democratic election landslide since 1964. So you could not have a bigger gap. But so far, what's happening on the ground just completely refutes what the polls are predicting.
And there's some legal challenges. There's a number of court cases. Some of them have gone up to the Supreme Court. Obviously, with your legal background, you're looking at this with great interest. Is there any disruptive potential with any of these cases? I'm talking about Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, possibly in Michigan as well. These swing states where these challenges on late voter submissions. What do you think about this?
If the election is very, very close, as in within a point in swing states, then we're going to see litigation that will make Bush v. Gore look like a walk in the park. So it all depends on this. If Trump wins by 2 or more in key swing states, election over, nobody has to worry about it. If it's really close, then we're just going to see a massive legal war for the next month.
So even with an electoral landslide, let's say Trump achieves something as good or greater than what he achieved in 2016 in terms of electoral votes, you're saying it really comes down to the margins within each of those individual states.
Exactly. If the margin is less than a point, you're going to see Democrats will all claim that the voter suppression and absence of being able to turn in their ballots for 2 weeks after Election Day is the only reason Trump won. And so they'll litigate it and fight it and contest it for as long and as much as possible. If the lead is big enough, they won't fight it. But if the lead is small, the legal war is coming.
You know, we saw what happened with, let's say, you talked about Bush v. Gore in 2000. Al Franken comes to mind in the Senate race in Minnesota in 2008. I mean, how long could this drag on, this kind of air of undecided results?
It could go, I mean, Bush v. Gore went all the way to December. This could go all the way to Inauguration Day. If it was really, really close, don't be surprised if it gets dragged on. The U.S. Supreme Court has hinted it will not allow that to happen in some of its decisions that it issued and in the decision it issued in Bush v. Gore. But, you know, there's a lot of unknown votes on the Supreme Court, so time will tell. But it could easily go all the way up to Inauguration Day.
And the nomination of Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a lot of people thought that you know, getting her into position before the election, but as it turned out in the recent decision there, she didn't weigh in actually. So is the time factor, does that mean that she might not be that sort of deciding conservative vote on a split decision like that?
No doubt, because it's much tougher to stop ballot counting that's controversial ballot counting after a ballot is already in than it is beforehand. If you say, look, you have to have your ballot in and that's it, everybody knew the rules, no problem. It's going to be much harder for the Supreme Court to try to throw out ballots simply because they were received late. So Barrett is, in my view, an unreliable and untrustworthy vote. Time will tell what she actually does.
So all of this talk of late ballot submissions, even in South Carolina, I don't know about other states, but they're saying that you don't have to have a signature or to validate the signature on the ballot because of the pandemic, because of COVID, all under the color of the pandemic. So do you see the lockdown, the pandemic, I mean, besides it having an effect on changing election rules in some states, do you consider this to be a real wedge issue in 2020?
No doubt. I mean, Democrats have used it to argue that somehow you can't even request a ballot like you normally could because of the pandemic. So people had to have it sent to them involuntarily. Suggested that you have to that people can't even return the ballot. They only can give it to their mailbox on the grounds of the pandemic. So I think the pandemic has been used as a pretext for some legitimate reforms and not requiring certain kinds of in-person contact. And also the envelope's been pushed for things that don't appear to even be related to the pandemic. Nothing about the pandemic prevents you from dropping off a ballot at an election location. Nothing about the pandemic prevents you from requesting a ballot. And yet that's what Democrats' claims are. So I think sometimes they've hid behind the pandemic as a pretext simply to flood the ballot box with as many ballots as they possibly can harvest and gather.
And coming into the end of this, a lot of people were remarking already that this is just eerily similar to a lot of the conditions from the 2016 election, the big projections of leads by Hillary Clinton. Biden seems to be doing similar numbers in national polls, national opinion polls. And is this kind of setting it up for a repeat of 2016 in that when Hillary lost, they blamed it. They said that the election was stolen from her, and they blamed it on the Russians in that case. If that happens this time, how do you think the narrative is going to play out? What do you think where they'll put the blame in terms of how the election was stolen from Biden?
They'll claim vote suppression, and this is already being previewed by Nate Silver, who basically was calling for polls to have inflated Biden margins so that he and others could claim when Trump wins, or if Trump wins, that the election was stolen. I mean, he said this publicly now. So clearly that's the objective. They're planning it in advance even more overtly than they did in 2016. But they've just changed the culprit. The culprit will now be vote suppression rather than Russia. They may throw Russia in at some level, who knows? But clearly that's their plan. Their plan is if Trump wins, to claim it was stolen. They cannot acknowledge that the American voting public just disagrees with them.
If they do claim voter suppression, I mean, you've looked at the numbers in terms of early votes, and there's been surprising performance from Republicans in sort of early voting and mail-in voting in a lot of states. And a lot of people expected this was going to be, the Democrats would be leading in this trend right across the board. So in terms of late votes, there might not be that late vote tally. I mean, the Democrats have done a lot of early voting and a lot of mail-in voting as well. So is there going to be like a legitimate tranche of last-minute votes in Pennsylvania, for instance, as a swing state? Or do you think this is just going to be a lot of noise on the legal front, in the courts and in the media?
I mean, at least according to the polls and all data that's available, the election day surge is only going to come amongst working class rural Trump supporters, not urban, minority millennial Democratic Biden supporters. Now, you never know. We won't know until it actually occurs what's going to happen. But at least all data so far, all evidence in so far, shows Republicans overperforming vote expectations and polling expectations, and Democrats underperforming polling expectations and data expectations. So there won't be much evidentiary basis to claim vote suppression as the excuse. That won't stop them from doing it. There was no basis for Russiagate either.
And are you going to be releasing, the last thing, are you going to be releasing your bets, your calls for the election, the down ballot races and other bets? And if so, where can people find it?
Sure. You can go to Twitter at Barnes_law. There's also, I have a small YouTube page of Barnes Law that has it posted as well. Or you can go to People's Pundit Daily, which has a YouTube What Are the Odds show where I went through all of that in detail. And he's also doing independent polling. And he was the most successful pollster of the last 3 electoral cycles. And he shows it Trump close everywhere. And so all of those places people can find the information that they want. My view is I think Trump is going to pull off another upset that might even be bigger than Truman's upset win over the polls in 1948.
Thank you very much, Robert Barnes, and good luck in the next couple of days, and of course on Election Day as well.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's a fantastic segment.
So that was Robert Barnes. That's episode 5 of the Election Edge special series that we produced, which is up at 21stcenturywire.com. It's also up at the UK Column website as well. So it's around. So there it is, folks. That's how it's going to go down. So it was the Russians in 2016. In 2020, it's going to be voter suppression. So the only thing that can really stop this from happening is that if Trump gets such a margin on the day, overperforms, like it's an electoral landslide. So even if they're able to hold up, let's say, North Carolina for 9 days, which is what they're planning to do, because of COVID, they managed to extend the voting submissions for 9 days after the election. Can you believe that? Because of COVID. Because apparently you can't mail in your ballots if you have COVID, or you can't sign your ballot in South Carolina if you've got the pandemic. So it's ridiculous. So they've used COVID. They've used COVID to change election laws in multiple states. Can you believe it? We warned about this in the summer. We warned about it, that something like this was going to happen on this show multiple times. So, of course, really seeing it play out now is almost spooky. And I'd hate to be right about this particular situation. So, look, we're going to take a short break. I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about a couple of other issues. Pete Buttigieg has surfaced again, calling for lockdowns. Boris Johnson's called for lockdowns as well, starting next week. National lockdown in Britain, unbelievable. And a couple of other things. Mark Zuckerberg will talk about what he's been up to, and Facebook's censorship of yours truly as a result of a report critical of Mark Zuckerberg that we posted on Facebook. Facebook attacked us by blocking our ability to share content on their platform. We'll talk about that after the break. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. This is the Sunday Wire. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You can say that I belong to all the moments that I couldn't laugh. Sink into my oblivion. You can say that I am yearning for something that's already gone. But I am not a prisoner. I want to feel what it's like when sorrow turns into strength. I want to feel what it's like when there's no screeches in my head. You can say that I'm chasing something that is unattainable. So you know my way to...
Let's talk about the real world for a moment, shall we? Where you're not some wonderful lone wolf hero, but you're part of a team and you play your position, because that's what America is, Mr. Jeffries. It's one big team. Now, this might be difficult for you to grasp, but I am a patriot. And a patriot is one who makes the right moral choice. Sometimes it takes a strong man to make that
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stcenturywire.com. And we have another guest on the line coming up from behind the curtain at ACR. We'll talk to him in a second. But before we do, I want to give a big shout out to everybody who has, firstly, those of you who have downloaded the Brave browser. There's a link to Brave on our show page. You'll also see the banner up the top at 21st Century Wire on the home page. Brave is a internet browser, much like Safari, Firefox, Google Chrome, for instance. But Brave is slightly faster, slightly cleaner, has fantastic customizable settings to block ads and all sorts of things. And we're hoping that you, if you don't use Brave yet, download Brave from 21st Century Wire on your laptop, on your desktop, on your tablet, on your smartphone. And if you download from us using our link, Brave will, because they support independent publishers like us, they will throw a tip, some of their back coins into our tip jar. And when they do that, well, we have some bats, and they are not worth a lot now, but the more people that use Brave as the adoption increases for this new browser, as it grows, though hopefully those bat coins will increase in value. Those crypto coins that Brave circulates, they'll increase in value over the next year or so. And that's one way you can help support the work we're doing at 21st Century Wire. So you get a fantastic free product, and at the same time, you're helping us as well via Brave. So it's a win-win situation. And so we really appreciate those of you listening to the show that have A, downloaded Brave, and B, are using it. And some of you have tipped us as well with your back coins on our pages at 21st Century Wire, and we really appreciate that. So it's a great way you can, for nothing, really no cost at all, you can support the work we do. So we really appreciate those of you who have. And if you haven't, please do it right now on all your devices. And tell us if you like it. A lot of people love using Brave. They also use Brave in in parallel in conjunction with another browser like Firefox, for instance, or Safari. So it's nice to have that other option. For some people, it's their main browser. So that's fantastic. So thank you very much. And also anybody who has supported us, a few of you who've donated during the last couple of weeks, a few of you donors out there, subscribers, and members at 21wire.tv, thank you so much for your support. And because of your support, we've been able to do the things like what we've done during this election season, produced a fantastic looking show with brilliant content. We think so anyway. Election Edge, episodes 1 through 5. Definitely will put our analysis on par with any mainstream media outlet, and our production isn't too far behind them either, considering the resources that we have to work with, which isn't as much as some other media organizations, definitely not, but we're still, hopefully we're punching above our weight. I think we are. So thank you everybody who has supported us. Because of your support, we're able to do more of that sort of thing. So thank you. And also our live blog at 21 Wire as well, the Election Edge live blog. These are the whole thing in terms of an election package. We just put that together just for this election, and we think it's delivering value for people out there and informing people as well, giving them information that they're just not going to get on the mainstream channels. So thank you very much for your support. Now joining us on the line here, Basil Valentine, unfortunately not available this week. He's out taking the pulse of the world along the south coast of Albion. But Hesher from ACR, our producer, also host of the Boiler Room on ACR, the Alternate Current Radio Network, and also host of the Hessian Session as well, music program, metal program on ACR. He's joining us right now. Hello, Hesher. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me today, Patrick.
Yeah, it's great to also get your take on things. I mean, well, first of all, you're in this probably the second biggest electoral prize in the U.S. election, the state of Texas, and second only to California, which is blue all the way through at the moment. Not really, it's not. There's streaks of red in there. But how's things looking in Texas? What's your general feeling? I mean, I'm seeing the odds have really tightened, and it's almost like they're expecting Texas is going to go for Trump. What are you hearing?
I keep seeing a lot of stuff in the mainstream news. They're saying that Texas has turned purple, so I guess that means they think we're kind of split down the middle. But I don't feel that way when I'm out and about. Of course, I'm not in the city centers at all, but it doesn't look very purple to me. It looks pretty Trumpish out there. I mean, I can see where they're going with that. There's definitely a factor, especially with so many people relocating lately. We see a ton of out-of-state license plates. Oh my gosh, it's crazy how many out-of-state license plates there are in Texas right now. But it doesn't feel like it's gonna go Biden here. I'm just not seeing it. The signs are not there. Quite literally, actually, I'm noticing not many political signs at all this time around. I think maybe both sides are a little bit concerned about the polarization, and I'm not really seeing a lot of that yard front campaigning that we used to.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Hesher, that I've picked up when I'm following the People's Pundit, for instance, or which I know some of the ACR crowd follows, like Daniel Spalding and people like this, Robert Barnes, the shy Trumpers. So that's a real thing. This has been polled. This has been proven that people, when they're polled, when asked if they support Trump, they won't say. They'll either say they support Biden or they'll lay it off as undecided, and they'll hardly admit before voting that they pressure. They don't want to get it's got a stigma attached to it, at least in terms of how the mainstream kind of handles that. So you could have a lot of shy Trumpers in Texas as well, and that might explain why there's a lack of yard signs in that kind of polarized atmosphere that we have. That would increase the shy Trumper factor, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and I've noticed that the concept of doxing, that used to be more for people in like the deeper parts of the internet. And now all of a sudden everybody is worried about it. Like it's become mainstream to be concerned about being doxxed, or, to have your political views known in your workplace, for example. And I've commented on Boiler Room a few times that I've seen some recent, how workplaces do those training modules. You got to do your annual sexual harassment training module and then this and that. I've seen some of the recent ones. Like I've had listeners send me, screenshots and snippets from some of their training documents. And in many workplaces right now, I get the impression it's almost a requirement that you have a certain politic, and it's never a Trump politic, if you get my drift. So I think people are concerned about, their bread and butter when it comes down to expressing their political views in some cases. Not everybody. Not everybody. There's other things going on here in Texas that are quite the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation with one conservative, Tom Luongo, from Gold Goats and Guns. I think, I always get it mixed up if it's Gold Guns and Goats or Gold Goats and Guns. I think it's Gold Goats and Guns. So he said that, we should, because of all the voter fraud, and we should have our votes on a blockchain and it's all verifiable. But then there's that kind of a secret ballot aspect to it, and that's really important. I believe that that's an important thing to preserve, which is that anonymity, because of the pressure, because of the polarization, that you can, no matter what's going on, that on election day, or whenever your time to vote is, you can cast your ballot and you can do it. And if you want to, you can keep it confidential, because of that. So I think that's an important thing to preserve. Now, in the era of digital utopia, our gods of the Silicon Valley might have, another thing. They might have some other system or some other idea.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know, man. The whole system seems very questionable right now, and it's like no matter what happens, we're going to be hearing about voter fraud. No matter who wins this year, we're going to be stuffed with it. So, plus the whole, I guess that's a bit of an unintentional pun, because we're dealing with all these mail-in ballots now, and I've been kind of watching what Project Veritas has been doing, and a lot of their exposés have been here in Texas. There's ballot harvesting happening. There's all coercion, all kind of multiple really weird stories. And it's always the Biden campaign or, one of the left-wing other campaigns that are happening here in Texas that are doing shady stuff caught on tape. You can set Veritas's stuff, their analysis and presentation aside, and just look at the raw tapes, and you can see illegal activity happening. So I'm wondering, if the polls are so certain, that Biden is going to be doing so well, why are the campaigns being allowed to and or encouraged to do illegal activities, illegal campaigning activities like ballot harvesting? So
that's a felony.
Yeah, that's a big deal to go to those lengths and think that it's worth it, especially when there's so many gotcha videos about this stuff now. It's like the hubris is hard to imagine, and the risk that people put themselves at to do that. So I don't know. I haven't seen any stories about right-wing ballot harvesting or anything like that, So it's just another piece in that dissonance for this election and the polling numbers.
Yeah. So you don't see it on the right. Absolutely not. What you do see on the left is the constant projecting of the idea that the Republicans are involved in voter suppression. And there's a couple of journalists that have made a career out of this. And they come up every election and said, voter suppression, they're striking, African Americans from the voter rolls and da-da-da. Okay. Now, first of all, some journalists have made some big claims about this, and I'm not aware, and nor have I seen. They're talking about hundreds of thousands of voters being disenfranchised, but I have not seen. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've looked. I've not seen any legal cases from any voter that says that they were unable to vote as a result of being, suppressed in this cross-checking system that, for instance, Greg Palast, the left-wing journalist, that he's constantly pushing. He comes out every election and does this whole thing about voter suppression, and he shows all this evidence. But there are routinely hundreds of thousands, millions of people constantly being removed from voter rolls all the time, because people move, people die, for instance, and there is absolute evidence that the Democrats. There's an old joke that says something like, what is it? The Democrat voter registration volunteers. First thing he said, they sent them out to the cemetery. So it's a joke, but there's some truth in it, because they have caught in terms of ballot harvesting, basically stiffs, dead bodies. So, who would go to such lengths? But this is just standard procedure. This stuff's been going on for, 100 years, 100 more than that, since democracy. But the Democrats seem to be more skilled at it in terms of the kind of street organizing of it. And I saw the Veritas videos, that woman from Texas. She was like, doing the numbers in her head about how much per vote, how much. So if you wanted to buy votes, it's X, like
right.
3,000. She was just quoting them off the top of her head. Like, that's what you need to pay. I was like, wow, it's
yeah.
crazy.
Right. Like they've got it down to an equation. How many votes do we have to buy?
Yeah. So anyway, I hope she, if that's a genuine report, she should be arrested.
Oh yeah, and they've got those going in Michigan too. I've seen a number of those in a number of states. And then there's this whole giant question mark of all these mail-in ballots. The narrative seems to be for the Biden supporters and the do anything to get Trump out of office people that don't worry, everybody. And I just think this is hilarious. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think it's hilarious that they're saying, don't worry, everybody. You're seeing all these disparages, like you see 20,000 people at a Trump rally and 18 people at a Biden rally. It's because the Trump people are stupid and they're super spreaders. So those people are trying to spread COVID, like you pointed out earlier, this insane reporting. But everybody else on the left, it's like, oh, we're just smart and we care about you a lot. So we're staying home, we're doing the right thing, we're wearing the mask, we're abiding to the Biden platform of nothing but COVID response, and we want that to be super harsh. But 90 million of us have already weighed in and checked the bubble for Biden. So that's kind of their narrative. It's like, oh, we got it in the bag because 90 million of us already mailed it in, and the rest of us will be there to vote when it matters, and we're just being smart and safe by not going out and supporting this guy. And that doesn't make any sense to me. That does not fly. That is not a narrative that I think they should even try to sell, because it's obvious the guy is he's a goat. He's a goat, and if he wins, I suspect it will be my prediction that it would be by cheat. I really don't think that this guy can actually win. And if he does win, it's going to be, like many people have posited, it's going to be Harris in charge of everything. She'll be the figurehead.
Yeah, what a nightmare. What a nightmare. That crazy, cackling junior senator from California. So,
oh my gosh.
So here's this is what one of our readers said, commented on our Election Edge program. They said that I don't hear anyone else saying this, but I think the Dems have suppressed their own vote due to COVID fear-mongering. So that's a good point that this reader brought up. So my question is this the worst miscalculation ever? Like they really banked on COVID. They've banked on fear. They've banked on the negative vibes and all that's the dark winter that Biden's, warning about. Is this a massive own goal, a massive miscalculation by the Democrats? Like, they really think that they've misread the American public so badly, and the media is kind of backing them on it. So it gives the impression that more people want to be locked down than not. And the opposite could be true. It could be many more people want to be free than to be locked down. I think the Dems are suppressing potentially their own vote. I think they've driven a lot of moderates possibly either to, sit it out or vote for Trump. I really do. I think they've misread it.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. If we're gonna keep rolling, anywhere close to how we used to roll as a nation here in the United States, they've way overstepped and they've possibly destroyed their party. And that's been one of my biggest concerns with relations to the COVID response this whole time, all year. It only took, we were in, I guess it was April or May or maybe even sooner when we started to ask ourselves over here, like, how can they do this without having the horror to pile up with it? You know what I mean? The documentation of the horror. If they're really gonna destroy liberty and freedom completely in the name of this, is this the best they can do? You know what I mean? Cases and PCR tests and masks and race riots. I mean, is this really it? Like, we're gonna just watch Western culture get flushed down the toilet into, some sort of dystopic 1984 over this, and I don't mean to belittle anyone that's been sick or anything like that or lost anyone, but frankly, we know way more people that have lost people to the reaction of COVID. You know what I mean? The lockdowns and suicides. I mean, we know at least 5 people within 1 degree or 2 degrees of us and our listeners that have lost family members to suicide as their response, their personal response to the lockdowns. So how is it that these people can behave like this? I'm talking about those on the leftist, progressivist, extremist platform of COVIDianism. How can they behave like this and expect to get reelected, expect they're, in a country that's functioning anywhere close to how it used to? How do they expect to get elected? How do they expect to run anyone anywhere other than in the cities?
I think they've really I think they've miscalculated it. They've overblown it. Clearly, they've overblown it, and I think they underestimated the the tolerance level or the intolerance level now of a lot of Americans that are just, they want to see the end of it. They want to see the back of it. If it's the most dangerous respiratory illness known to man, how come people need to be constantly tested over and over again to prove that they've somehow got it, without symptoms even? It just doesn't, like you said, it just doesn't, it doesn't come through, it doesn't, the product is not impressive. The virus it's not that impressive. You can quote all the numbers you want, but if for anybody that's throwing big numbers at me, the U.S. for instance, my first thing I'm going to come back with, let's audit those. It's not that many. 200,000 is not that many. You can audit that. Let's look at every single death certificate. Let's see who actually died of COVID and who died with COVID. And I think that wouldn't be too difficult to do. Is a government inquiry or some sort of major audit could do that. They've already started doing that in Britain, and they've shaved off I think 5,000 on one round, and in terms of our 45,000 odd, the big number they were quoting here, they immediately could shave off 20%. Just on a couple of basic audits and looking at how the statistics were compiled. So if you did that in America, I'm guessing you could easily bring it down under half, basically. And when you do that, then the picture changes completely. The policies are completely dependent on the impressiveness of the numbers, completely. So, and here we are. We're stuck in this this death spiral now. Now, Pete Buttigieg took to media, and is calling for a lockdown. Surprise, surprise. This is a McKinsey & Company's candidate who dropped out of the primary race. Mayor Pete, as he's known, South Bend, Indiana. So we got a little clip here. Let's hear what Mayor Pete has to say.
Indiana, some countries in Europe, such as the UK and France and Germany, are actually reinstituting lockdowns. If Joe Biden wins, should another lockdown be on the table?
Well, hopefully it doesn't come to that, because we will see swift action coordinating with and supporting public health authorities, telling us what we can do as citizens without requiring any kind of mandates. But everything has to be on the table in order to keep Americans safe.
There it is. Pete Buttigieg sounds like a CIA candidate. I'm sorry, but the guy just like oozes of spookiness when he talks. He's like a total robot, basically. So that's the Pete there saying, lockdown's on the table. Right. That's not going to go over too well. So a lot of the Democrats have already, I see the tweets, I'm looking at the posts, some high-profile people are saying, when Biden's elected, and like Janky Uyghur from the Young Turks, he's done it as well. When the Democrats take over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we'll see if they're going to, come through with some progressive policies. And it's that internal Democratic, turf war already going on. They're already sort of circling over the spoils of victory. But none of them are they're not questioning any of these mainstream polls that are, touting these big numbers for Biden. So they're already planning on what jobs they're going to get, in the cabinet, and who's going to be on the foreign policy team, who's Biden going to select as Secretary of State. I mean, they're already basically. I mean, it could be a massive shock. I'm saying, Hesher, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the key swing states, and I'm just seeing all the movement going towards Trump in most of the swing states. Most of them, even you could say all of them, including Nevada and Arizona. So, I think he's going to win Florida by 5 points or more. I mean, if he wins Florida and Pennsylvania by more than a percentage, anything over 1 or 2%, I think that's a done deal. They can file all the court cases they want, but like Robert Barnes said, if the margin's big enough, like say more than a 1.52%, there's not going to be that flood of late votes. If you see trucks full of late votes being dumped at the recorder's offices in states after the election, that it's a complete fraud, because the numbers say that all the Democrats have already showed up for early voting. Now that could have been the miscalculation. If they really wanted to do a late voting scam, they would have told everybody to vote late, but that would be a risky strategy, and I don't think they've got the brass balls for that, because you can't tell 20 million people around the country, or however many Democrats voted, many tens of millions, to wait till the last minute or turn your vote in late. That's a bit risky. So they might not get that last minute flood that all of these court cases are being prepped for, and if they don't get that, then whatever the result is in these states, more likely, especially if it's more than a 1.5 or 2%, the result's going to stand on election night, more likely. They can still go to court and say that they haven't counted all the ballots, but anybody could kind of make a guesstimation as to how many ballots that's going to be, and if the numbers aren't that impressive, then it's just going to be a lot of noise. It's going to be a lot of noise, and the media will pick up on stuff, I'm sure, but I don't see the flood, Hesher, coming in. I don't see it coming in, but I see there's going to be tries made. There's going to be attempts made, but I don't see the trucks full of ballots, arriving after Election Day. The ones that saying we need to count every vote. Every vote's precious. You can see how all the media narrative is going to be. The heartstring music, and This is Sheila. She's only 18 years old. This was her first election. She has her whole future in front of her, and her vote was not counted. Is this the future we want for America? And you can see the CNN pieces, how they're going to roll them out. But I don't know. You think that's going to happen?
Oh, they'll definitely roll it that way. There's no doubt. They'll do the full spread. You know, they'll do Sheila, and then they'll pick up, Lieutenant, Jane Joe from, out of, her duty station, and how her ballot didn't get picked up, and she really wanted Biden.
Oh, yes.
So they'll get a military representative in there probably. Yeah, I'm sure it will. How long do you think they can do that, Patrick? Like, how long can they draw out the whole we're not going to accept this thing? Like, can that go for? And obviously, it can go for weeks. Can it go for months? I mean, can it go into 2021?
Yes, it can. It can go right up to inauguration. And I'm saying I don't want this to be true, and it would just be a real grating pain in the backside. But I'm saying people have to be prepared that they're going to take this all the way till inauguration. And they're going to fight every single step of the way, including on the street, not just in the courts, but on the street as well. So it's going to be the courts and the street. And I think, I don't know, the Supreme Court's hinted in the dissenting opinion in, I think it was the Pennsylvania ruling, they said that they may revisit this after. They need more time. So it's likely they might revisit this after the election. Now, that's going to be even more controversial because people are going to think that it's the conservative justices that are, preying on the rights of and the voting rights and disenfranchising Americans. So what's going to happen? This is how the scam's going to go. They already have to segregate the late ballots. So anything that comes in after November 3rd, let's take Pennsylvania, for instance. Anything that comes in after November 3rd, those ballots go in that box. And anything that comes after November 6th, normally they would allow 3 days for late ballots, absentee ballots and whatnot, and they might never get counted if the state had a wide enough margin. But anything after 3 days, anything late gets segregated in another box. So what you can see here happening in North Carolina, the Democrats petitioned for 9 days. They're accepting votes 9 days after the election. So the problem is, and they're saying, but they have to be postmarked by Election Day. Listen, those are free envelopes. None of them get postmarked. I can't see how you can postmark one of these. Mine didn't have a postmark on it. You just throw it in the mailbox and away it goes. So, and by the way, in Arizona, it says on the ballot, must be in by 7 p.m. on Election Day. And if you're going to mail it, it said, please put it in the post 6 days before. If not, you risk your vote not being counted. Like, there's no messing around in Arizona. There's no messing around. It's written down. That's the rules. End of story. But because of COVID, they've created all of these exceptions that, in all these different states. And so the Democratic Party activists, they've got tons of money. They're filing injunctions all over the place. And so if the Supreme Court comes back and say rules on that, the argument is in Bush v. Gore that there's the potential for instability, national instability. Now, that could very well manifest itself with the crazy crew that we have now, as opposed to 2000. I mean, it's much crazier now than it was 20 years ago, without a doubt. There's no doubt about that. So having all these, what I'm saying, Hesher, is having all these stacks of ballots, all these, quote, segregated ballots, even if they're late, and if the Supreme Court comes in and says, no, that's not constitutional, you can't use COVID to change election laws in the courts. That's the state legislature. That's their purview. Constitutionally, state legislature makes election rules. That's constitutional argument. So it's kind of, it's a red line that you can't go past. And if the Supreme Court uphold that, and it's likely they will, if it does get heard after November 3rd, but then you're going to have the media like salivating, looking at stacks of, ballots over there, segregated ballots, and saying, do those votes count? You can see the CNN segments and all the different MSNBC and all the little emotional appeals. Those votes still count. Yes, they were late, but because of COVID and the pandemic, and we can't disenfranchise all, and they'll count up all of these ballots in all of these different states and kind of amalgamate them into a total number, let's say like 200,000 or whatever, even could go up as high as 500,000 spread over 50 states or who knows. And they're going to make some big appeal like these votes matter, one man, one vote. And then there'll be the attack on the Electoral College, which we saw after the 2016 election. They'll continue with that. So that will be get rid of the Electoral College. We're victims of voter suppression. Every vote counts. Even late votes count. Like, who needs deadlines in elections, right? Because we just stretch the rules out. Don't even need to sign them. Actually, they're petitioning not to check signatures in South Carolina because of COVID. Because apparently, if you have COVID, you can't sign ballots. Apparently, so I mean that's how the scam's structured on this. So I think it's just going to be a full court press. Like, they're going to go for every single thing, and then if there's protests, if somebody gets hurt or dies, then it becomes an Arab Spring in America. Then it's an international issue, and everyone will be weighing in. This will be international. The U.S. election is an international election now on media and social media. It's not just confined to America. Everyone's going to be protesting, and it could be a Black Lives Matter. It could break out into a BLM thing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
I don't know. That's what I'm seeing.
They're already scheduled, I believe. I think a number of them are. I saw a list last night. I don't have it handy, so I can't reference it. But yeah, there's a number of those groups, that one included, that are planning and scheduling, and the quote unquote wargaming that has gone on both sides of this election is very interesting. It's very interesting to see. And man, I keep fighting off this feeling. I keep having this feeling like, oh, we're almost there. Tuesday will happen, and at least then we'll have this phase of this behind us. But when I, think about what you were just talking about and extrapolate it out and look at what all these other groups are planning, it really just feels like, oh boy, this is going to be an interesting couple months here. We got the big day on Tuesday, and then whatever the reaction to it is going to be, and I think it might be long and drawn out. I agree with you. I think this is not going to be okay, we have our decision on the 4th, and we all know what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be that, and at the best case scenario, that's our best case scenario, so we just all don't know. Worst case scenario is stuff starts burning, and we see Walmarts getting broken into and people getting hurt and stuff like that. So I'm really hoping that's not where we're headed this week, but I can't help but wonder if that's going to be a factor. And then we're, of course, looking around the world, and we're seeing these elevated extreme lockdowns in Europe, Ireland, Scotland, UK, all over the place, Germany. And it's and then we've got Joe Biden threatening us with a dark winter. I gotta wonder where this is going, man. And I don't think it's a simple case of let's have an election and see what happens, and then we'll at least all be able to brace for what's next. I do not think we're not going to be given that luxury this time around.
I think it's interesting. Boris Johnson, he announced that a national lockdown on November 5th. Okay, that's the 2 days after the U.S. election. The 5th of November, it's Guy Fawkes Day. So that's from V for Vendetta. Remember the 5th of November when Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament, and so that's kind of a symbolic statement by Boris Johnson. It's almost like he's saying there's going to be no rebellion. Lockdown. It's going to be on the 5th. So he's really like kind of pushing the issue to the people because it's a very unpopular policy. And the government's really backed themselves into a corner on that. But in terms of the election, the COVID is definitely, lockdown is a wedge issue. It's definitely on the ballot. I mean, Trump's put it on the ballot in a bunch of states. He's talking about it at the rallies. It's like, it's either we're opening up with me or you're going to get locked down with Joe. And it's been framed in that way. And it's to a large degree, that's true. The Democrats, like we said, they've totally banked on this. Now, the post-election chaos, I got a taste of it this week, how it's going to roll out on social media platforms. So Election Edge, I think it was episode 3, we criticized Mark Zuckerberg for his open role in engaging in the post-election scenario, what Facebook's going to do in terms of controlling the information. He even admits it, that Facebook's going to be involved in, that there won't be a result called, and that Facebook's going to have this job. They're endowed with this great responsibility of trying to help regulate the true information on the internet. So I posted this report, which we criticized Zuckerberg quite heavily and Facebook. And lo and behold, what does Facebook do? Facebook then blocks my account, my personal account, so I can't share to any other. They're calling them complex entities. They mean groups and pages. Like the language is getting more cryptic. And so I can't even comment on anything. I can only, I think I can share to other people's pages or talk with people, and my own 21st Century Wire page. So we can, share between myself and 21 Wire's page, but that's it. Everything else is locked down on my account until December 29th at 5:29 p.m. And so that is me criticizing Zuckerberg, and I get a clamp on my account right before an election. And what I've reported was on the mainstream media. I'll play you the clip right now. This is this morning on CBS. And let's roll this. This is Zuckerberg. This is them talking about Zuckerberg, about his role, like his responsibility. I mean, you won't believe the amount of meddling that he's involved with. They're openly admitting it. Go ahead and roll this. Hopefully we got this clip right.
Only on CBS this morning, we spoke with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg about new plans to stop misinformation ahead of Election Day. Zuckerberg says that Facebook is focused on connecting its users with accurate information through a voter information center. You can see it. It's at the top of every Facebook and Instagram page. Take a look. Facebook calls it one-stop shop. It connects users with details about local election guidelines for registration and mail-in ballots. In our exclusive interview with Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, he told us that the tech giant will prohibit new political ads in the week before the election. He also says the company is preparing for potential disputes over election results.
One of the things that I'm quite worried about after Election Day is that since it may take additional time for the votes to get counted this year, especially with mail-in voting, there's a greater chance of civil unrest and violence after the election. Some people expected there to be an answer to who won the election on election night. I don't think we're necessarily going to get that. And I think it's important that we start preparing people now, that there's nothing illegitimate about taking a few extra days or even weeks in order to make sure that all the votes get counted. In fact, it would be illegitimate if we didn't make sure that all of the ballot votes were counted.
So what will you do, say, on election night if one candidate says, I won, when all the votes aren't in?
We're putting in place a policy. We have a partnership with Reuters, and if someone tries to prematurely declare victory, whether it's in a presidential election or any of the others, before there's a consensus on who won that election, then we're going to add some context and a label to that post saying there isn't an official result on this election, and directing people to the voting information center where we'll have the list of all the official results that have come in.
Do you have any concerns about campaign ads on your platform? Are you thinking about readjusting your strategy about that?
Yeah, so thanks for asking about this. So one of the new policies that we're announcing is we're going to block new political and issue ads in the last week of the campaign. And I generally believe that the best antidote to bad speech is more speech. But when there's a vote, then if someone is kind of dumping some new information, if it's misinformation in the last days of the election, then there may not be time for that normal kind of debate and process to play out. And that's why I think it's important to have extra restrictions in the last week.
You and I have had the conversation before about misinformation in political ads. There does seem to be a bit of a contradiction there, that you won't challenge incorrect political ads, but you will challenge misinformation from candidates.
The thing that I'm very sensitive is having us be the ultimate deciders of what is right and wrong and true and false in the world. There are a number of cases where we can rely on other authorities. Around elections, we partner with local election officials. So if someone is saying, hey, don't go to this polling place because the lines are really long, and the local election official says, no, that's false, it's fine here, then we'll take that down. That's voter suppression, and we'll take that down no matter who says it.
This week we learned that the FBI tipped off Facebook to Russian interference on your platform. What did they point out to you that you didn't know?
Well, over the last few years, we've put a lot of effort into building partnerships with the intelligence community and election commissions around the world, as well as the other tech companies. So part of the normal security apparatus now is that we share intelligence and tips with each other. And between the partnerships that we have in place with governments and other tech companies, we were able to find and disrupt this relatively early.
You're talking about what you're doing on your platform to safeguard this election, but this is also a personal cause for you and your wife, Priscilla. You both announced that you were donating $300 million to do what exactly?
There have been these recent debates about funding the U.S. Postal Service, and we just had a lot of conversations about, wow, is there anything that we can do to help contribute to making sure that all of the infrastructure is funded in the way that it needs to be, that they had the poll workers they needed, including being able to pay hazard pay to folks to be able to come in, that they had PPE for all their poll workers. So we donated $300 million to two groups to be able to partner with a bunch of local counties and state election officials to make sure that they have the resources that they need.
Now, what's really amazing is that this wasn't.
Okay, so see that at the end, Hesher, 300 million for certain groups in certain districts. I wonder which districts those poll workers are going to be sent to. I just wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to be in swing states, or are they going to be in the Silicon Valley? I doubt they're going to be in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I don't think they need them there.
I don't think so.
I don't think they need them there. And wow, that's quite a lot of money right there to throw out. I wonder if they're helping any of the. I'm not going to wonder. I already know what this is. This is madness, man. He's admitting there that he's working with intelligence agencies, that they're they're doing partisan boosting basically for campaigning and all that, and locally this is crazy stuff. I mean, I'm not surprised by any of it, but just to see him there on CBS just openly talking about it, it's nuts, man. What these tech giants have done. I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with the Google the meeting with the Google execs there after Trump won, and what they said was that they're going to do everything in their power to never let this happen again. And by this, they mean, a populist conservative president be elected. And wow, I wouldn't say it's staggering to see them roll it out, but what is staggering and shocking is to see the way that the government is powerless to do anything. It's like we had these tech hearings this week. You and I were talking offline about Ted Cruz grilling Jack Dorsey, and I'm just blown away that this is the case. This is what it looks like. This is what it's playing out as in front of the public. Just basically like a government that not much we can do about it. We can certainly grill you in one of these Zoom meetings, but when it comes right down to it, Dorsey, Zuckerberg, and the like. Bryn, they are meddling in our elections quite heavily here, and we were, the nation should be very sensitive to meddling after what the media has done to them over the Trump election.
Yeah.
So what's the deal? Why is everybody okay with Silicon Valley homeless looking people and Android looking people meddling in our elections?
No, directly meddling. And I love what I love about Zuckerberg is he says, I'm really uncomfortable with Facebook being the final word on what's true and what's not. We really don't want to play that position of God, but having said that, we're going to be blocking any false campaign material in the week running up before the election because we don't have time to have that debate, to have that conversation and check the facts. So we're just going to block it. Basically, so he's saying I don't want to be the arbiter of truth, but he is being, and then the other breath he's saying, but I am going to be the arbiter of truth. I mean, this is unbelievable. They spun a whole narrative about the Russians. And they have, of course, you heard they had to throw the Russian thing in that Zuckerberg interview, but not giving any specifics. The FBI tipped you off about Russian interference. I mean, give me a break. It's complete fiction. That's almost like an obligatory thing. You have to. Russians. It's like,
yeah. What does that mean? Does that mean that the FBI has Facebook servers, or is the FBI in charge of cybersecurity on the Facebook servers? No. Actually, what it means is, as Mark pointed out there, they work hand in glove with the security agencies and government entities to the point where it's publicly reported that Facebook itself on some of its campuses have government labs, military internet, SIPRNet basically is what they have. And that is not something that goes lightly to a tech company or a private company. Again, that one kind of pokes holes in we're a private company, we can do whatever we want. Well, why is it that you guys have government-funded and government-linked laboratories to do your work with the Atlantic Council and FBI? And, he's like, oh, yeah, he makes it sound like they have this flowery little partnership, like, it's this happy accident. All of a sudden, people who care about election, and Facebook just happen to be there, so we have these meetings with the FBI. It's not like that. He's weaving a story that looks like something that, people who exist on television that only watch Forensic Files and CSI and stuff would believe. But anyone that's actually worked in tech or in government, it's really easy to see through what this is. It's a government entity.
Quasi is and becoming more so melded with those state agencies and with the military. He's already saying, he admitted we're in bed with the CIA and the NSA. So some partisan in the FBI, and we know they exist, obviously, after the last 2 years. Some partisan with the FBI is like looking at Facebook groups and thinks that he spots Boris and Natasha. And so he goes and calls Facebook and says, we think we might have some Russian interference. We're not. They could just leak it to the press. And the press gets it in their little dossier and says, oh, the FBI have tipped off Facebook about Russian interference on their platform. It could be nothing. But immediately it would get seized because it comes from an official leak from the intelligence community, and then the media just repeat it, without even questioning. And then Facebook would be like, they'll just nod and say, yes, well, yeah, there's something there, and we did speak to them about something, and then it's validated immediately. The Russians aren't interfering with the election. I mean, what constitutes Russian interference? Nobody says anything. It just gets spoken of like Goldstein in 1984. So that was, it's a level of meddling that's wide open. They're touting that you're not going to be able to call the result, and we're going to be taking control of the information. So I got blocked, I think, for that very reason, and I'm not the only one. Tons of people I'm seeing on social media saying that they've been blocked or shuttered or whatever. I mean, tons. So it's happening en masse. There's a whole thing going on, and so now you're going to see people are going to start talking more about. They're almost expecting. I mean, the talking point that's been seeded for months is that Trump is going to lose and refuse to leave office. But so you combine that with the Biden landslide, and then you get Trump winning on the day, and then Biden loses but refuses to concede, and then it's on. It's on, and the point is that that battle could exist separately from the reality of what the actual evidence is in the voting in the various states. So they can spin the narrative up without any real basis for it. And they can drag it on just long enough to create instability, to create, massive doubt. Immediately, all the Democrats are going to suspect there was election fraud or voter suppression. CNN, MSNBC, they'll all be on the case. Bloomberg, they'll all be on the case. And they'll be pumping out propaganda. And enough of those people are going to believe it. The question is, Hesher, and everybody out there listening, the real question is, do they have a majority? In other words, the people who watch MSNBC, who watch CNN, who believe what's on Bloomberg News, does that constitute enough of a majority in America, or have they oversold their mandate? There's a false impression that there's a consensus, but on the ground it's very different. I'm going to say, based on what we saw 4 years ago, and based on what I've seen in the last couple of years now, and basically the dissent against lockdown that I'm seeing in so many different states, I'm going to say that is not a majority opinion. I think it's less than 50%. I think it's teetering on something like, 40%, a bit more than 40, maybe 40, 42. I think it's a minority opinion, but it's been blown up that a lot of people believe that it's a majority opinion. So you just have to look at the response to the Biden campaign, and I think I'm correct. I think they've really overinflated a lot of this stuff. They're going to overinflate this post-election chaos. And what could happen, the only thing that's going to save the country, I think, is that Eddie's going to come again, and Eddie's going to step up, and Eddie's the guy that you don't hear about. He's that kind of the silent majority in America. The Eddies, they called him after World War II, the Eddies, the soldiers who came home. The Eddies are going to step up, and they were invisible before, and then all of a sudden you'll see the majority, and the majority don't want it. If that happens, that's probably the only real thing that's going to save the situation. I'm not saying they're not going to try. They're definitely going to do it. They're definitely, how successful it is, how much it catches on and takes root in terms of a narrative, depends on if Eddie shows up, as Michael Savage said in his book, one of his last books, said the Eddies. But the problem is the Eddies are thinning out as well. So are there new Eddies coming? Down the ranks. I'm talking about the normal, working class, stroke middle class American, common sense, isn't crazy, just normal people. How many of those are out there? That's the question. And are they going to appear and step up on the day, or when it's needed for them to show up? Can we show up anymore? It's under this atmosphere of lockdown, COVID. Can you even show up? Can Eddie even show up? That's the question. So it's a very strange time. Hard to read. Hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Is Eddie allowed out of the house? What state?
Yeah, exactly.
What state is Eddie in?
Where is he? He's on Zoom. I mean, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. In the spirit of culture and sport, I will shout out Basil here and give you guys some sport out of Texas. I'll let you know how Texans are doing sport right now, since all professional sports seem to be turned off for the time being. They're concentrating on election sport. We had the Biden-Harris campaign bus get mobbed by multiple vehicles bearing Trump flags and signs, headed from San Antonio to Austin on Friday. And there's footage of it out there on Twitter. You can see this. There's this big gaudy, it looks like a party bus or something for Biden and Harris, right? This big luxury tour bus, with 360-degree wrap of print and paint on it. Biden, giant pictures, the whole 9 yards. Probably $1 million bus, probably more. And it's going up Highway 35 here in Texas, and it is surrounded Like it's in a 3-lane. It's in the part I saw. It was in the fast lane, in the left lane for us, and it had I don't know how many, multiple, a good dozen or more big Texas trucks. We're talking Ford F-150s, F-250s, Dodges, Chevys, the whole 9-yard Texas big truck supremacy that happens around here, and they were decked out with American flags and Trump 2020 flags. And they were just crowding that bus. That bus was, they were in front of it, they were behind it, and they were on the side of it. I didn't see these trucks doing anything dangerous. They were a little bit close, but Texas drivers know we like to tailgate here, apparently. Still getting used to that. But it was very interesting to see that, and it was... they had to cancel the rest of they had to scrap 2 campaign events there. So it was, and New York Times is trying to say it appeared they were trying to force the bus to the side of the road. I did not actually see any evidence of that, but of course the Times is going to frame it that way. But they said out of an abundance of caution, the campaign canceled an event scheduled for later that Friday at a parking lot. So. They're doing parking lots through Texas, and our people said no, we don't want that. So that was interesting to see out here in Texas. They said no thanks. Get out of our state.
I'll bet Beto was on that bus as well, coming from San Antonio. He's probably hitching a ride. he's stumping for Biden as well. Old Beto O'Rourke, whatever his name, Robert.
Yeah, Robert. That's right. Obama was out there too. What'd you think of Obama showing up at some of these jam-packed Biden events?
Yes, I saw one where Obama was like introducing Joe. He saw Joe Biden, and he looks in. There's like a door into an old school, and nobody's coming out. He said Joe Biden. I was like, God, what happened to Biden? Maybe he kicked the bucket or whatever. And then didn't come out. And then finally he comes out in his black shades and it's just so ridiculous. And Obama's wearing a mask that says vote on it. And I just like his star quality has really faded, Obama. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of African Americans that they don't even like him anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. He just doesn't have it. It's unusual that an ex-president will come out and just be aggressively campaigning for somebody. That alone on its own really says how weak Joe Biden is, because normally if it's a good candidate and they have the party behind, the people behind you, you don't need the former president to be like stumping for you and his wife. And I mean, it's just not necessary. But with Biden, it's like he needs all these aides, he needs all these sort of support people, to carry him over. This weekend at Bernie's, and they're carrying him over the finish line. I mean, and it really demeans Biden. It really demeans Obama as a former 2-term president, 2 terms. We have a tradition in America that you and everyone's familiar with, is that ex-presidents don't get overly active in terms of contemporary politics. Like once you've done, you step back and you let the other people come up the ranks. This is so typical of the boomer generation. They don't want to relinquish it. They're clinging to power. They don't want to let go. They don't want to let anybody come up through the ranks. It's like, the Rolling Stones on tour forever, all of eternity. And that's the only tour that's going to go. And even if they have to be on life support. So that's kind of how politics as well. I mean, look at Biden. He exemplifies, the boomer who can't retire. I mean, just hang it up. He's had how many years 50 years in politics. I mean, he ran for president a bunch of times. Nothing happened. And somehow they rigged the primaries this year and they got him through because of the pandemic, probably. But, he typifies everything that's wrong with the establishment. And that's who they're going to field in 2020 with all of these like hungry millennials that are desperate for a maverick candidate. And they throw out Biden. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. The guy that helped author the crime bill of 94, the guy that was involved with the Patriot Act, running with the woman who was enforcing so much of the garbage from these crime bills. It's like, that's a really, really hard sell. I can see why Obama did not want to endorse Biden. We were blessed with actually witnessing that. That is why Obama waited until the last minute to endorse this guy, much less get on a bus with him or, step on a stage with him. Total embarrassment. That was pathetic. It's a really bad look. So, I can totally see why Obama resisted that as long as he could, but I guess he could not, someone called him up that he could not deny to support Biden on this run. But my gosh, that was really sad to see, almost even now.
No, it's really tragic. I mean, the whole thing's tragic. Look, we're gonna wrap it up in a minute. Before we wrap it up, I know that a lot of people have been sending me this clip, and you've got it too. This film called Songbird, and looks like a big budget Hollywood movie with a COVID theme. I know you saw this, Hesher. Michael Bay is behind this. I mean, it's pretty. I would say bad taste in terms of like what people are going through now, but it's, designed to. It seems like it's scaring the what out of people. On one hand, I haven't seen the film yet, but it's a little bit too, in terms of the narrative, a bit too hyper real. And I'm asking the question as well, like, when did they start making this film? Because they couldn't have. A lot of people think they couldn't have put that together since lockdown or during lockdown. I know they shut down all the major productions in Hollywood, at least for the last half of March, April, and then April, May, June, July. What do you think about this? The Songbird, is that what it's called, Songbird?
Yeah, it's called Songbird. A lot of people have probably seen the trailer. It's making the rounds right now, and it's really upsetting people. I guess it's being billed as a love story. A love story between Sophia Carson's character and KJ Appa's character during America's 214th week of lockdown in 2024, as a late-stage version of COVID-23 mutates to infect people's brains. So if anyone hasn't seen this trailer yet, I don't recommend it, but if you're curious, check it out. It's got every little tiny bit of dystopic future, COVIDian future you could imagine. It's got quarantine camps. It's got, forced vaccination. It's got just about everything you could hope for in a dystopian world. But people are upset about it, Patrick. People are feeling like it's exploitation, basically, for them to be making this movie about this. And they are saying, they're calling it the first film to be made in Los Angeles since the quarantine. And I don't really believe that. I have a hard time believing that. With my limited exposure to people that work in mainstream media, and I do have a couple of people that I've talked to about this, it's very unlikely that this thing was created in the last 8 months to the point where we're seeing it right now. But possible, maybe possible. But I would argue that if it is possible, one would wonder how. Like, how many waivers does a director need to do that? How many state, federal, and industrial waivers does one need? And who specializes in waivers the best? I would say the U.S. military. And I've got a list of 10 Hollywood movie scripts that have been altered by the Pentagon in front of me here, and I would say a good percentage of them are Michael Bay films. Michael Bay has been involved with a whole bunch of movies that the Pentagon has had say in. So any movie that uses any branches of the military or intelligence agencies and whatnot, those are usually run through various government sources, like Zero Dark 30, like The Sum of All Fears, 1984 even, the movie 1984, Clear and Present Danger, GoldenEye, and Tomorrow Never Dies. The Bond films have done this. The Transformers franchise, another Michael Bay film right there. Pearl Harbor.
The Benghazi movie. He made the Benghazi film, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think he's done a whole bunch of these. Pearl Harbor Pearl Harbor's his too, so that one's fairly recent. Well, 2001. And there's details here about who his contacts were, and what kind of things have to get changed. Black Hawk Down, of course, was another one. But the big thing here is, usually, Patrick, they'll wait a year or a couple. I mean, in the case of 9/11, they waited quite a while to do any fictionalization of it or dramatization of it. But people are really pissed off about this Songbird thing, because this is like, people are experiencing this right now, and people are scared of what it's going to turn into in the long term. And here's a guy, a director, who works with the Pentagon on many, many films throughout his career. He's the guy that did Independence Day, I believe that was one of his early ones. Someone can fact check me on that, but I think that's one of his movies. He's been behind all these, alien invasion movies, and he's going to throw his hat into the COVIDian cult here, and it's got Demi Moore in it and Bradley Whitford, and people are pissed off because this thing is happening right now, and people are, actually honestly worried that this is the kind of world we're heading into here. And here's a Pentagon-backed Hollywood director known for making propaganda films, basically saying, here's what 2024 looks like.
Yeah, so there's two ways I'm looking at this. One of them is, like you said, people are pissed off. So I thought, how cold and insensitive and heartless does the film director and producer and studio have to be to try to ram something like this down people's throats when they're vulnerable, when people are already on their back heels, people who have, had their lives rearranged, in some cases ruined, in some cases met with tragedy, not from COVID, but from lockdown, okay? And thinking, and my only answer is that there's that they themselves, Michael Bay and whatever his support bubble there is in Hollywood, they're not directly affected, physically. In other words, I don't know anybody that knows anybody that has died from COVID. I don't even directly know anybody. I don't know anybody who knows anybody. So, I mean, if this was the raging pandemic that it's been sold as, so I assume the Holly was okay. So they're not, like, most people are not directly affected by it. They're directly affected by lockdown. They're directly affected by the fear porn and whatnot, but not by, quote, COVID. So that's one, so do they really even buy into it? And the other thing is, I can see redemption, Hesher, on this if the subtext of the film was something like, at the end, they reveal that there was, the whole thing's a hoax. Like there is no pandemic, and it's just this police state has been erected around it. It's ruined everyone's lives in society. And then at the end, they topple the thing, like in V for Vendetta. So there's redemption at the end in the story. Now, if that's in the story, if that's what the subtext is, then it can be a good thing in terms of the dissension and opposition to the COVID fear porn and the lockdown, because it undermines the establishment's narrative, the Bill Gates narrative of pandemic world. But if it doesn't do that, is what I'm saying here. If it doesn't do that, if it still portrays it as a real pandemic and the worst, respiratory disease known to man and whatever, contagious all over the place on the money and everything, and blowing in the air. If it does that, then this is the most crass, cold, heartless effort maybe in Hollywood history. I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the direction I'm leaning with it. I mean, they appear from the preview to be treating the illness as exactly as the mainstream narrative has treated it all along. But who knows? I mean, I'll be shocked if Michael Bay comes through even with a whiff of, to use the stupid term, truthiness, even in the final moments of this film. I mean, maybe it'll come like character specific, and maybe there'll be some sort of conspiracy vibe to it, but I have very low hopes considering the rest of his movies that I've seen.
I mean, why, if you're going to make a production during this time, that it has to be, I mean, what people need, if Hollywood wants to preserve any of its utility or credibility, what people need is something that makes them feel it's uplifting, that makes them feel good, that gives them hope, that, you know, shows the sun breaking through the clouds. That's what people need. That's what the country needs. That's what the world needs. And that should have been the first thing that Hollywood served up, was an iconic, you know, It's a Wonderful Day for 2020. You know, something that's good that people can, you know, show at Christmas for the next 20 years, you know what I mean? And instead, they serve this up. Okay. That really says it all.
Right.
And I think, you know, Hollywood's going to die. They're going to die a slow and painful death anyway. They already are. But when people really realize, you know, that they had the opportunity to do something good for humanity, to help balance out the, you know, complete power grab by government and institutions through COVID and lockdown, and how many lives it threw into press. And they could have served something up, you know? It could have been some great, there must be, I mean, they have enough talent, great writers, they have great actors, they can do that. They can do something cool that's positive, that, you know, lifts up the human spirit. But no, no. We're going to serve this up. I can't believe it.
Yeah, let's show a movie. Okay, so we've had nothing but fear porn coming out of our mass media cartels for all year. And right now, things have just been, you know, we've had our economy crashed. We've got hundreds of thousands of people applying for unemployment every week. And we've got people with legit medical conditions that would rather stay at home and suffer than try to go to a hospital right now because of the way the medical system's been changed in response to this. What else? Our cities are uninhabitable, almost, areas of them at least. Our food supply is in jeopardy. We're being told by our government that we can't breathe fresh air or go outside in many cases, or run our businesses in many cases. We're being threatened with biotech products, compulsory acceptance of biotech products. And Hollywood decides, well, we're going to show you a movie. We're going to make you a movie that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, breaking all the rules that we set up for you people to live by. And we're going to show you a future just 2 years from now, 2 to 4 years from now, where your life is an actual hell. How does that help? That's not horror movie. You know, that's not sci-fi. That's not outbreak film. I don't know. I would call that terrorizing people.
It's a little too close to the bone, even for them. And like, so that comes under the category of propaganda, really.
Yeah.
Purely propaganda. And it's a little bit too close to the bone, you know, a little bit too keen on the timing. And that's new. That's just like real time like big budget propaganda, injecting it right in there. This is, it's a new, this is like a new level in terms of speed and even more incredible considering that all the productions were supposed to have been shut down, as we said. So I don't know. Really, this is like this is new unexplored territory, even by our standards, but is this the norm? I mean, so I don't know. I'm probably going to have to watch this film at some point. I sort of don't want to, but I'm probably going to have to watch it. It's going to be tough, but yeah.
I'm with you. I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm going to have to check it out. I wonder if we will. This is going to come out in early 2021 or at some point in 21. I wonder, Patrick, if we will still have movie theaters by then. The movie theaters are all looking like they're going bankrupt. I mean, our one here in town is finally back open, but after months and months of being closed down, nobody goes. The selection of movies is bad. It's like old movies and kids' movies. It's to the point where you can rent out the movie theater for a birthday party at this point, a socially distant birthday party. So I wonder, Patrick, maybe they will just not even tempt us to go to the theaters to see this horrible piece of propaganda. Maybe they'll just serve it up on Amazon Prime like they did the new Borat movie or something, since it is nothing but a propaganda piece.
Well, yeah, they're sort of hastening their demise because, well, here Cineworld has declared bankruptcy. That's 130 cinemas around Britain. So, 60 million population. That's, they're all the IMAX ones. That's like the new state-of-the-art ones, 4D and all that. They're gone. They might get bought up for, $1 or whatever because of all their debts. But, that hasn't happened yet. So they're all shut. So, yeah, I mean, when you start seeing major cinema chains closing, and one of the reasons they're closing is not just because of lockdown, but also a lack of content that drives the economy of movies. So Hollywood, that's a lot of the money that Hollywood depends on and also the promotional aspect of it, because people don't realize the cinema industry, the live cinema industry, the physical going to the movie, that helps to promote the online movie industry. When you take the cinema industry away, you take a lot of the brand cachet, you take a lot of the sexiness, you take a lot, the red carpet premieres, all that stuff. That stuff that inflates that's why Netflix has been successful out of the gates. But it might not be as successful, you won't be able to do those big budget productions without the mass economy that goes with, when you combine cinema and online. So in a way, they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot. And all these actors who are all like on board with the lockdown, they're basically shooting their careers in the foot in the future. So, that's not going to help them. And neither is Joe Biden either. I mean, they're literally shooting themselves in the foot. This is how stupid and detached and delusional these people are, honestly. I mean, it's not going to last forever. Their celebrity status is fading so fast. So fast.
Oh, yeah. And it doesn't help that we see them pimping themselves out on YouTube. No offense to any, hardworking YouTubers out there. I'm not trying to go there, but it's just weird. And it changes the paradigm. It flips it upside down when, I open my YouTube in the morning and I'm seeing Jack Black and Will Smith and, Tom Green and like all these, all these people who we've traditionally only seen in massive productions, for the most part, are now on YouTube and, saying whatever they think and doing silly stuff and just doing, YouTuber stuff. So it's kind of like the pedestal kind of drops a little bit there, don't you think?
Big time. Yeah. Ricky Gervais, who I think is cool, actually. I like him. But it's really deflated his celebrity. Watching him being a YouTuber, that's the future for them, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's not good.
Yeah. Our musicians too. They want our musicians to all, I think you guys mentioned it on the show when that came through, but Someone in the UK was saying, "Oh, you guys need to get new jobs. It's like learn a new vocation because music's not coming back."
Retraining. Yeah,
yes, retrain.
Learn to code.
Yeah, what an insult.
Look, I managed to, I threw my hook in the water and I managed to catch Basil Valentine just for the last minute because we're going to wrap up in a minute. But I just wanted to get his digs in before the election. Basil, are you there on the line?
Good evening, Patrick. Good to be with you.
Great to be with you here. I'm on the line here with Hesher from Austin, Texas. Say hello.
Hey, Basil.
Hi. Which way is the wind blowing over there?
It's we've got it at our back. We're looking good. We're looking good here, man. We had a very busy street full of Halloween kids out there last night. People did not lock down for Halloween in my neighborhood, so that was looking good. And we've got large groups of multiple Ford F-250s and Dodge Rams chasing Biden and Harris out of our state. So that's the update politically from Texas.
Wow. Well, a friend of mine has just asked me to put $10, of course, because you're so heavily restricted where it comes to online gambling. She's asked me to play a $10 bet on Kamala Harris being named, or rather inaugurated, as the next president of the United States. And that is available at 1,000 to 1.
Really? 1,000 to 1?
999 to 1. So if you think Biden is going to win the election, but fail to make it as far as the inauguration, for which, of course, he would need to be, either dead or declared unfit to take up office, you can get 1,000 to 1. And I suppose there are worse bets. Some people that were conspiracy-minded could even say that, Biden is simply a stooge and it's always been the intention to get him out of the way. If not after the election, then, if not after the inauguration, then why not before? I mean, I think the constitutional arrangement is that if even before the inauguration, the winning candidate at the top of the ticket is unable to take up the position because of physical infirmity or death, then the vice president-elect becomes president.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, there are a few scenarios where that could happen. There's even a scenario where in a type of a contested election scenario where there's no outright majority, that the vice president then goes under Donald Trump and Pence gets shoved out, and it's a bipartisan administration. And that's decision's going to be made by the House of Representatives, effectively by Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, it would be Pelosi if for any reason Harris is out of the way.
Well, yeah. There is a scenario which we covered on previous. If there's no outright winner, if it's a tie somehow electorally, then the vote goes back to the states. Each state gets one vote. They cast one vote. They send one elector, and that vote is the accumulation of all of their congressmen and senators voting in that state, and then majority submits then one vote back, so 50 votes, and there's a type of a scenario there. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but it's on the books. They have a contingency for it.
Yeah, I mean, you pays your money, you takes your choice. Trump is still the prices on the two people far and away most likely to be inaugurated president in January have remained very steady, with Biden roughly 2 to 1 on, 15 to 8 on. In fact, the best price in the village now is Biden 15-8 on with William Hill. So that's 15 quid to win another 8, making a total of 23. And Trump is 15-8 against. Stake 8 to win another 15, also making a total of 23. So you can actually have 20 quid on Trump, 20 quid on Biden, and so long as nobody else wins, you'll break even.
Right. Okay.
Which is pretty pointless.
Yeah, I'll say.
So absolutely 100% pointless. But usually bookmakers have got a margin of error. The same bookmaker will offer a margin of error, obviously, so that you can't bet on both and break even. You know, if you bet on both, you're going to lose whoever wins. But with different bookmakers offering different odds, in this particular case, in this two-horse race, essentially two-horse race, it's very, very tight. But, you know, let's remember that 4 years ago, Clinton was 5-1 on. You had to have $50 to win another 10. We tend to forget now she was considered pretty much a stone cold certainty. I know of somebody, I might have mentioned it, who had hundreds of thousands of pounds on the Clinton win, hoping to buy some money. Never works with gambling. And there was some smart money for Trump. So the polls, I mean, the sheer data, not the sort of intuitive ground facts. If we ignore the enthusiasm factor, the numbers are even more in favor of Biden than they were for Clinton 4 years ago. One or two interesting statistics to come out of the Betfair betting podcast, which I shared on the Election Edge and on Twitter, is that Biden is doing much better with seniors in the Midwest than Hillary did 4 years ago. So Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these key battleground states, Biden does much better with the over 60s than Clinton did. They didn't quite trust her, you know. But Biden's sort of seen as a much safer bet. There's only fine margins in those states needed to swing it. Likewise, in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and many other states, there are huge increases over 2016 in the number of 18 to 29-year-old voters. Something like 30 or 40% in Florida, 50% in Georgia, and 60 or 70% more 18 to 29-year-olds this time round than there were 4 years ago. And there's a higher turnout amongst them. And that demographic is one of Biden's strongest. So that's why, even though, you know, as I say, we've got this huge sort of on-the-ground enthusiasm gap. And, of course, some commentators are saying that individuals of all ages, races, sexes, and classes are generally much more reluctant to say to telephone pollsters or pollsters on the street that they're voting for Trump than they are for Biden.
Yeah, shy Trumper.
Even though that has to be factored in, that's why Biden's 15-8 on. That's why you only get slightly more than half your stake as winnings if you're backing Biden, and why Trump is 15-8 against. It's key demographics like that people think, commentators think, are going to swing things Joe's way.
That's what they're saying. That's what that's what that's what Nate Silver's saying. That's what all the mainstream gurus are saying. But you know, they said the same thing, similar things back in 2016, and yeah. So we'll see. We shall see.
It's all about the hidden Trump supporters, really, and a lot will depend on the ground game on Tuesday. Who gets their people out?
Well, the ground game, it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize the GOP began their ground game for this election Guess when they started the ground game?
A fortnight ago.
No, not quite. They started the ground game for this election in April of 2019.
Wow.
They've been going all out since April 2019.
Wow.
Nationwide. And in the swing states mainly. So, yeah. You combine that with the shy Trumpers and a lot of other factors too, the burn rate, disaffected Bernie Sanders supporters that won't vote Biden. They'll either vote nothing or they'll, throw their vote to Joe Jorgensen or even to Trump in some cases. There's a few of those X factors out there. I call them dark matter, the dark matter.
Or even Howie Hawkins.
Who's that? Howie Hawkins.
He's the Green Party candidate.
The Green Party. Oh, I didn't know they had anybody.
Oh, yes, always. Who can forget Ralph Nader's intervention?
Right. Okay.
But he's been making even less waves than Jill Stein did 4 years ago.
Oh, she did well. Yeah, she did well.
Yes, and of course she was attacked. In fact, she was even smeared as being a Russian asset at one point,
Absolutely.
because she was photographed at an international convention in Moscow at the same table as Putin.
That's right. Yeah, she got invited to the RT event. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hawkins is an interesting figure. I don't think he's going to be much of a spoiler this time round. But he has made some interesting comments. The main one being that he doesn't think that the other two candidates are offering anything at all of benefit to the American people. It's sort of that neither of them really have anything to offer.
I'll bet he's got a tattoo of Greta Thunberg on his.
Well, he may do.
On the small of his back.
And of course, there's always the libertarian candidate as well.
Yeah, she's interesting, Jo Jorgensen. Yeah, she's not bad. She's just like something they throw out there for people to have an ironic, non-participatory vote. It's just not there. They had some. Gary Johnson had a bit of gravitas, definitely last election.
Some sort of traction, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, he did. And he was big into, he's on the marijuana issue. He was really, hot on that, and that was really surging at the time. Definitely, that was a big up and coming issue. So he did really well riding that wave, for instance. So, but third party is still not working. Still not a thing yet in America. It's still not there.
And I think that's disappointing because apart from anything else, I think it puts the other two candidates on their toes. I miss that. We've actually in relatively recent past had certainly two, quite serious third-party candidates who affected the final result. Do you remember John Anderson?
I do very well.
He ran in 1980 against Reagan and Carter and got 6.6% of the popular vote.
Yeah, he was good. He was allowed in the debates as well. He got a good airing.
Yes. That's right.
So did Ross Perot. Ross Perot did as well until he dropped out. So it got some showing in the past, but recently it's just problematic in the hyper-partisan environment. Any successful third-party candidate is going to get blamed for helping a populist get elected, like with the situation with Trump. So,
I heard on a different independent radio station that Perot's family were threatened. Perot was told to get lost.
Yeah, that's validated. I think that's accurate. Yeah. Yeah. So, but
it's a dirty business, Patrick.
Hey, we're gonna. It is terribly dirty. We're gonna wrap it up though this week. We're out of time, but just any last words, Hesher first, and Basil, final thoughts before we depart?
All right. Well, since we're talking irony votes, Ruckus from the Daily Ruckus let me know on Boiler Room the other night that you can vote for Oliver 2020. Yes, we've reached the point where if you want to put a irony vote in or a protest vote, you can vote for a golden doodle from Massachusetts by the name of Oliver, and he's from Fall River. His official campaign slogan is "Because people suck," and his girlfriend Pepper lives across the street, and she's going to be the first lady if Oliver wins. So there's something to think about there.
Lyndon LaRouche, eat your heart out. Wow.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I think there'll be a few people voting for the dog this time around.
I think so too.
I'm just having a quick look to find some other sort of joke candidates, but they seem to be thin on the ground. It's not easy to get on the ballot, is it?
No, it's not. It's not easy at all. It's hard work. Yeah, Kanye West is in there. I think they tracked him at about 6,000 votes nationally so far.
Right.
Yeah. That's not bad.
No, not bad at all.
Yeah, he hasn't spent any money on his campaign, so he's doing all right.
But he might spend a lot of money and, really sort of go for it seriously. I mean, after all, 4 years ago, people didn't take Donald Trump seriously, but he got a huge amount of coverage. We had the Trump mania and all the rest of it, and the rest, as they say, is history. But the West's bid was never really remotely serious, was it?
No, not at all. I think John McAfee's in Spanish prison at the moment. Like they're trying to extradite him to the U.S. for tax for not filing or something like that. So he usually runs every year as a protest candidate recently. So get a vote for the Mac, free John McAfee. But hey, that's all we've got time for this week. But I want to say thank you very much to Hesher from ACR, host of the Boiler Room, host of the Hessian Session. And where can people support the Alternate Current Radio, Hesher, if they want to get behind the best independent radio network online?
AlternateCurrentRadio.com. You can find the donate link and the shop link up in the main menu. We got all the stuff. We got the mugs, the shirts. So we got the Patreon, the PayPal, the crypto, all that good stuff. You can find us up there. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for joining us this week. I really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you, Basil Valentine, for your brief cameo this week. And I'm sure you're going to be busy. You can check out Basil, by the way, on our live blog, Election Edge. He's posting tips and stories there, and that's been kind of entertaining watching your little flurries there, Basil, things that you're picking up and noticing. But you're going to have a busy couple of days in front of you, keeping an eye on this one.
Absolutely. I mean, the final analysis, to be honest, I don't know which way it's going to go. I suppose if you literally put a gun to my head, I'd say Biden,
because out of fear or because you believe it?
For him, but if I was forced to pick a winner, I wouldn't dream of having a bet in this particular event. And you know how much I like a flutter, but if forced to pick a winner, I'd say it's Biden.
So I forgot the headline for the story. Basil Valentine has gun held to head, picks Biden. So that's.
Let's hope not literally. But,
that should move the betting markets, I think, sufficiently. All right. Well, anyway, good luck with all your flurries, and we'll see what happens. It looks to me like we're seeing a Trump win. Everything's saying Trump. But the lawfare could hold up the result. That's the thing. So I don't know what would the bookies do if there's a contested election? Will they hold the bet?
You've got to read the fine print.
Okay.
Everybody will be different. I mean, I think that, where they're going to pay out is on who's inaugurated.
Right.
So you might have to wait some time.
Right. Okay. Wow, that's interesting. It's just going to keep dragging on. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us this week, and also check us out at 21stcenturywire.com. There's going to be updates on our Election Edge site. Please get and share our videos on YouTube, our posts on Election Edge. That we're getting censored basically on Facebook, totally throttled, and all of our election stuff on Twitter is being throttled as well, quite severely. But especially Facebook, like they've literally blocked us from sharing. So we need your help to get the content out, of course. So anything you can do in that regard, anybody listening, we appreciate that. We appreciate you getting the word out. It's important information, we think, and it's good that people are going to know before the election what plans are being made to basically contest the result and throw this thing into a legal quagmire. So it's very important to get that information out there to everybody you can on all your little channels and all your various platforms. We really, really appreciate the help. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the show. And we will catch you, we'll see you on the other side of this pandemic election. And check out ACR on election night. There's rumors and talk of rumors of a live stream from the Boiler Room team on election night. That could be something really interesting. If that happens, obviously we're going to be promoting that on 21stcenturywire.com and on social media. So that's something that you might want to chime in and see what we're doing there on ACR on election night. So keep an eye on our feeds, keep an eye on Alternate Current Radio's pages and feeds as well, and you'll see more information about that in the coming days. And you'll see another edition of Election Edge, episode 6, will be hopefully released tomorrow night or possibly Tuesday morning on Election Day. So keep an eye out for that. We'll also put out a little report about Obama's recent rally. You'll probably see that tomorrow as well on our channels. So take care, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic week, and it's going to be a big Tuesday, and it's going to be wild afterwards as well. So fasten your seatbelt. Brace yourself for impact. That's all we're going to say. Brace yourself for impact. It's because there's definitely going to be an impact. So we just don't know how it's going to play out. But that's all. All the best. Take care.